may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, obviously, if you are a rebuilding team, your first thing you're trying to do every single time is just load up on those future rookie draft picks. I mean, getting those future rookie first, I mean, you are going to have a guaranteed value increase by the time we get to next offseason. I know a lot of people aren't necessarily into the 2022 rookie draft class, but I'll say it doesn't matter because we know once you get to next offseason, Dynasty owners are going to be drooling at the mouth to take those rookies coming in. I mean, just imagine what the price point is going to be on a Spencer Rattler. But of course, you can't go and get those first round picks every single time. Sometimes you have to go through and you have to make sure if you're trading away a veteran and that team doesn't have a future pick, maybe you just trade for a player that you think will see their value increase next offseason. And I have two guys here that I think are guaranteed to see their value increase. I'm going to dive into the players themselves. I'm going to dive into why later on in the video. But of course, before we get into it, please guys, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to this channel. It helps us out so much. And of course, if you really want to support the channel, go over there, support it on Patreon, get access to extra podcasts uploaded every single day, get your very own Dynasty team broken down in depth on one of those podcasts. But yeah, let's dive into this video. And our first player we are going to be talking about is going to be Michael Gallup. So I know Michael Gallup, probably not who you're expecting in this video, given the fact that this is a player that's already pretty much gone through his rookie contract. He is 25 years old already. But I will say, I mean, if we are fast forwarding and looking at next offseason, this is going to be a very interesting situation here with Michael Gallup and this Dallas Cowboys roster. Because you're looking at Michael Gallup and you're going, okay, there are pretty much two scenarios here. Michael Gallup, A, re-signs with the Cowboys, or B, goes to a new team. Obviously, I mean, this isn't rocket science here. And we also need to look at what happens in both scenarios. So if Michael Gallup goes to a new team, we can imagine based on the free agent class next offseason, I mean, you do have some big names in a guy like a Chris Godwin, in a guy like an Allen Robinson, but we don't necessarily know if they are actually going to be leaving their teams, given the fact that it looks like both Tampa and Chicago will be able to pursue re-signing both of those wide receivers. But here in the case of Michael Gallup, I mean, we are unsure if Dallas is going to be able to bring him back because they have so much money tied up into very few players. I mean, that Ezekiel Elliott contract, oh my God. I mean, it may be one of the worst contracts in the NFL at this point. You look at the Amari Cooper contract as well. Amari's getting paid a ton of money. Obviously, Dak Prescott is. Dak Prescott definitely deserves that. But we can say, I mean, if Michael Gallup does come back, this team's probably going to have to get creative. This team's probably going to have to do something with another one of these players with those massive contracts. And if y'all remember, Amari Cooper signed that $90 million deal last offseason, maybe the offseason before. Regardless, he signed that $90 million deal. And if you look at the guaranteed money that is left on that contract, he has a decent amount of guaranteed money in 2021. But in 2022, it's not necessarily there. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys don't really owe Amari Cooper much at all after this season. So you could be looking at a few different scenarios here. I mean, if Amari has just a truly disappointing year, I mean, this is coming from someone who loves Amari Cooper, has an Amari Cooper jersey behind him, but it would be in the range of outcomes for this team to go, you know what, instead of continuing to pay Amari Cooper $22 million a year, let's just not pay him. Let's give Michael Gallup $10 million a year. And all of a sudden, you have Gallup and CeeDee Lamb as the two primary wide receivers for a passing offense that should be near the very top of the NFL with their passing volume. And obviously, that would be a fantastic situation for Michael Gallup. Or possibly they don't pay him. He goes to another team. And I really think Gallup, if he does get the volume, he can thrive because we go through and we look at Michael Gallup and what he has done in fantasy through his career. And I don't want to focus in too much on his rookie season, but if we go to his second season in 2019, I mean, this is a player that got 8 targets a game. I mean, that is very surprising. The fact that he was close to double-digit targets a game his second season. He averaged 79 receiving yards a game. He had 6 total touchdowns in 14 games. Now, I'll say, I mean, he didn't necessarily pop off the charts in fantasy, but he was the wide receiver 28 in points per game. This is literally right next to Courtland Sutton. I mean, it was Courtland Sutton, then Michael Gallup. And in the case of Courtland Sutton, he really wasn't battling that many options for targets, where Gallup was going up against Amari Cooper. Both of these players were in year 2. And think about the difference in price between Michael Gallup and Courtland Sutton, both guys that are going to be free agents next offseason. And I'm here to tell you that Michael Gallup, in a similar situation, arguably maybe a little bit worse given the target competition, was able to outproduce Courtland Sutton 2 seasons ago when they are both in their second year. I mean, that is significant. Michael Gallup is not going anywhere close to Courtland Sutton in fantasy drafts currently. Now you go to 2020, obviously Michael Gallup, it's going to be hard to take too much away from here because they draft CeeDee Lamb with that 15th overall selection. And it's not necessarily like the Dallas Cowboys thought they had a massive need at wide receiver. It's simply if a prospect as good as CeeDee Lamb falls down to you in that range, I mean, you have to draft them. That's just best player available there. And obviously, Dak Prescott also gets injured. So it's so hard to take anything away from Michael Gallup in year 3. But what we can see is we can go to the last 6 weeks of the season. And this is pretty damn funny here, to be honest. I mean, in the last 6 weeks of the season, you had CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup all completely healthy, right? All these wide receivers are healthy. And you have Michael Gallup, not necessarily a massive impact player in fantasy. He does finish as the wide receiver 28, though. And we need to keep in mind that this is with some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL. This is with an offensive line that is just completely decimated. And then you look at the other wide receivers here. A guy like a CeeDee Lamb, a player like Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 33 in points per game. So Michael Gallup outproduced Amari Cooper within the last 6 weeks of last season. And then with CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 46 points per game. So here, Michael Gallup crushed both Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb to end the year last year. Now, obviously, it's not like he was some league-winning player, given the fact that the situation was so bad for Michael Gallup. But if you just look at the other wide receivers in this same situation, clearly Michael Gallup was impressive in that context. Now, going into this next year, I mean, it's going to be very hard to see Michael Gallup finish as the top 20 wide receiver outside of a CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper injury, because obviously you're projecting CeeDee Lamb to be the wide receiver 1 here, Amari Cooper to be the wide receiver 2, and Michael Gallup to be the wide receiver 3. But regardless, this is a team that should have a very condensed target tree where it's not like they are having 5 wide receivers run routes throughout the course of the game. I mean, mainly it's just going to be those 3 guys getting targets. And also, this is a team that's going to have a significant amount of passing volume. So maybe if you are even a contending roster and you're just looking for some wide receiver depth, I mean, Michael Gallup may not be the worst bet for you to go through and trade for him as a guy that can give you this depth this offseason, and next offseason possibly finds his way into a better situation. Because we look at potential landing spots for Michael Gallup, and there's a long list of great landing spots. So the first one on the list, the Green Bay Packers. I mean, this is, of course, if Aaron Rodgers does indeed stay in Green Bay. But here, you would have a clear hole at wide receiver 2. I understand that they do bring in Amari Rodgers. I know that a lot of people think he is going to vault up to be the wide receiver 2 on that team right away. But Michael Gallup, definitely a better wide receiver than Amari Rodgers. And you could easily be looking at a situation where you have Aaron Rodgers staying in Green Bay. You have them really upset with the fact that Amari Rodgers is a bum rookie, and they go and just give Michael Gallup a significant amount of money to go to Green Bay next offseason. Then another team, the Las Vegas Raiders. Now here, if he went to Las Vegas, I mean, this would be a situation where he could easily be the wide receiver 1 on this team, with Henry Ruggs stretching the field, with him pretty much just being everything this team ever wanted Bryan Edwards to be. Now, obviously, Darren Waller would be seeing the majority of the targets, but still, would be a way for Michael Gallup to walk into a decent amount of targets. Then you could also have Chicago, like we mentioned. I mean, Allen Robinson is playing under the franchise tag. And what happens if Allen Robinson goes, you know what? We're done with Matt Nagy. I don't want to be in Chicago anymore. Get me out of here. Are you really thinking that they are going to have all the leverage in the world with Allen Robinson? They don't have any leverage, really. They just hit him with the franchise tag. So maybe A-Rob is out of Chicago, and then you have Michael Gallup as the wide receiver 1 for Justin Fields. Then Cleveland, also a very reasonable expectation, because you're looking at that Cleveland team. They literally do not owe a single dollar to either Odell Beckham Jr. or Jarvis Landry outside of 2021. So maybe they look to move on from both of those wide receivers instead of paying them hefty contracts that bring in Michael Gallup to be their wide receiver 1. And you have the Buffalo Bills here. Obviously, Stephon Diggs, the alpha, but Emmanuel Sanders, the wide receiver 2 they bring in for this year. They bring him in on a 1-year deal. Maybe Gabriel Davis doesn't take the step a lot of people want to believe. Then you have the New Orleans Saints here, and the Saints are going to be losing out on Traquan Smith. And obviously, this is a team that desperately needs weapons as is. Then you have the Detroit Lions, and this is an interesting case here. Because what happens if the Detroit Lions get that first overall pick next year's NFL draft? They either bring in Sam Howell, they bring in Spencer Rattler, they bring in someone to be a franchise quarterback, and they have Amari St. Brown here, a 4th-round wide receiver. They have Brashad Perriman, Tyrell Williams, both only signed to 1-year deals. And outside of that, they don't have a single guy on this roster. So maybe they bring in Michael Gallup to be the wide receiver 1 for a top-end rookie quarterback coming in. Then you have Indianapolis having T.Y. Hilton, 1 year left on his contract. You have the Chargers, Mike Williams on his last year. And you have Houston with pretty much nobody. Maybe this is also a team that gets the 1st or 2nd overall pick this upcoming draft. So there are so many good situations for Michael Gallup to actually see an increase in his fantasy value. We have seen him be very impressive before. We have seen him be right there with his same production mark at the same point of his NFL career as Courtland Sutton. Yet instead, you're getting Michael Gallup at a significant discount, even though Michael Gallup's playing in a much better offense. So yeah, I think Gallup is going to be someone that I would way rather target over Courtland Sutton if you're going to be getting him at a discount, because I think next offseason, he could be finding his way into a way better situation. Okay, so now let's go over to a rookie. And I know that this is going to be a lot more obvious for everybody, but this is going to be Terrace Marshall here. So with Terrace Marshall, I mean, it's so hard to project what Carolina is going to be looking like this upcoming season, because obviously you have Sam Darnold coming in. And Sam Darnold, we don't know what to expect. I am just going to be assuming that he is an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater, given what we had with Carolina in their actions to essentially pay the entire Teddy Bridgewater contract, only get a 6th-round pick in return, which is literally nothing when they're paying that contract. And then they go give a 2nd-round pick to go get Sam Darnold. I mean, I think that if Carolina is that confident that Sam Darnold is going to be an upgrade, we should be as well. But with the wide receiver room beyond that, I mean, you are looking at a situation where DJ Moore most likely going to be brought back on his 5th-year option, but Robbie Anderson only has 1 year left on his deal. And that's why I am kind of sitting here looking at Terrace Marshall as a guy that I am not going to be all in for this upcoming season in a redraft league, because you have so many players that are getting targeted. I mean, you have DJ Moore, you have Robbie Anderson, and you have Christian McCaffrey obviously soaking up so many targets on this team. But if Robbie Anderson is gone this next year, I mean, that is going to be opening up so much for Terrace Marshall, who is obviously a fantastic prospect. I mean, if we dive into the prospect profile of Terrace Marshall, very rarely were you finding an alpha wide receiver in this draft class, but that's exactly what you had here. With him only being 21 years old, we obviously love that age coming into the NFL, given the correlation that we've had to fantasy hits coming in out of their 3rd year. And then you also have the size, 6'2", 205 pounds. He ran a 4.45 40-yard dash. He was a 5-star prospect going over to LSU, which obviously is significant. Now in 2018, I mean, literally, he had no production at all his true freshman year, but he was playing on an offense that had Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Stephen Sullivan. Stephen Sullivan was actually a sophomore at the time, a 4-star prospect himself. So you're not expecting Terrace Marshall to be able to get on the field at all in 2018. So he only averages 21 receiving yards a game. But 2019, he goes out there, and with Jamar Chase, with Justin Jefferson, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I mean, he manages to average close to 4 receptions a game, 56 yards a game, and has 13 total touchdowns, and actually breaks out in his true sophomore season in this fantastic situation. So you're sitting here going, okay, Terrace Marshall, this was unbelievably impressive. You can make the argument that this is way more impressive than someone going out and just completely dominating on a team that doesn't necessarily have the same level of competition here. And then finally in 2020, he gets the opportunity to do it on his own. You have Justin Jefferson in the NFL. You have Jamar Chase just deciding to opt out a year. And here you have Terrace Marshall coming out, averaging close to 7 receptions a game, over 100 receiving yards a game, and he has 10 total touchdowns in 7 games. So Terrace Marshall a fantastic, he's an alpha wide receiver prospect. And you could be looking at a situation where next year they decide to let Robbie Anderson walk, and then possibly they can get an upgrade over Sam Darnold, or maybe Darnold was just ruined by Gase and you kind of see a reemergence similar to Ryan Tannehill. And all of a sudden you have DJ Moore running routes underneath. You have Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield, hoping that you're finding those boxes being stacked where Terrace Marshall can operate on the outside and he can be the alpha in this offense. And I think if the targets opened up with Robbie Anderson leaving a year after Curtis Samuel left, all of a sudden you're going to have Terrace Marshall as a wide receiver you can get really excited about. Now, thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. Thank you to everybody supporting the show. We got some new members of the flock, and Robert, Caden, Matt, Robbie, Dan, John, Ziggy, Blake, Oliver, and Devin. Thank you, my dudes.